This is my wizard outfit. Shazam! What's shaking, Bacons? DC is coming out to play with this movie. This is fantastic. This film is fantastic. With that said, I do feel I need to state that I know nothing about this character. I'm not familiar with the comics. I don't really have a background on this at all. This is me going to be reviewing this as someone who's walking into this film essentially knowing nothing, except I did read one of the comics where Superman discovers that Shazam is actually a young boy and then tracks down the wizard who is still alive in that comic and then reads him a riot act for putting the burden of this responsibility on a child. Shazam is the story of how one last wizard that has been protecting the realms from the 7 deadly sins, among other threats, is nearing the end of his life, and so he chooses a champion to carry on his line and the wizard traditions and powers. In this film, his champion is the troubled Philadelphian foster teen Billy Batson. Throughout this film, Billy has to learn his powers and his role both as a wizard now and in his current universe and with his new foster family, as well as figuring out who he wants to be, all while facing a new evil supervillain that has risen up to face him. I have almost zero issues with this movie. I was that blown away by it. I don't think I have been this retroactively excited about a film since Spider-Verse, I think. And one reason for that is, much like Spider-Verse, this film feels wholly unique, and that is such a rare thing to find, I feel, these days in Hollywood, because everything is just a reiteration of itself at this point. And especially with superhero movies, right? Because you and I, we've seen a lot of superhero movies by this point in time, and at some point they start to get repetitive and redundant, and you get this feeling like, I've seen this before. And you know what they say, there's nothing new under the sun, and that may or may not be true, but at least in Shazam, it feels new. And just like Spider-Verse, the way this film was handled honestly feels like a breath of fresh spring air. It was not Marvel. It was not the DCEU. It was not just another standard superhero story. It had its own style and tone to it that made it very fun and very engaging to watch. And while there is, of course, some predictability, it's like it's a superhero movie, there's going to be predictability. The exact path that the story takes is in no way predictable, at least in my opinion. And it has a truly delightful twist at the end that I did not see coming, that I just reveled in. It was such a fun twist. The story overall is a great Bildungsroman type story, which is a coming-of-age story centered around Billy Batson. But it is in no way a movie that is just for teenagers or just for kids, although it will appeal to those ages. I think if you do have a child who's probably, I wouldn't say take a young child to see this movie, but if you have a child that's around like maybe 8 or older, they would probably appreciate this movie on a different level than you do. But I also would say that this film is great for adults as well. You see a full gamut of a scared kid trying to learn who he is and how to deal with his life as a foster child, in addition to the layer of having a superhero that is younger, who has been thrust into this world without a lot of guidance, with a supervillain who's coming after him, trying to learn his powers and discover who he is in that realm as well as who he is in his personal life. That makes for a very deep, well-rounded story. And this is accompanied by a great backstory for the villain too. It's squarely established who the villain was, what his motivations were, why he became like this, you know, what happened to him, and you not only buy into Billy Batson and his life, but you also end up buying into the full background and story of the supervillain's life, which is great, and it's very difficult, it seems, for a movie to pull that off. I have to wonder, actually, if DC just needed to get away from the DC Extended Universe in order to kind of find its footing finally, because the last couple movies they've done where they have finally sort of broken out of that just dark, depressing, taking itself too seriously mold, they have had marked improvement in the story quality, in the directing quality, and in my personal opinion, in the production quality of these films. And I don't know if it was Zack Snyder that was maybe creating this, or if they were just so intent on differentiating themselves from Marvel that they went too far the wrong way. But whatever has changed, maybe just by giving the stories more freedom individually as standalone films that so do peripherally tie in, they have greatly improved. This is the kind of thing I was hoping to see from DC films. And you end up feeling not just for the story, but for all of the characters in this movie. From Billy to literally every single member of his foster family, to your supervillain, who's Dr. Sivana, played by Mark Strong. There are truly heartbreaking moments in this movie, and there are also truly uplifting moments in this movie, and they complement each other wonderfully. The story is incredibly well written and really, really impressed me. And I think another thing that this movie gets right as well, and I just want to talk about this, Shazam is an example of a movie that gets it right. It does inclusion, I think, in the best way possible. And by that I mean you're getting a full representation of different backgrounds, of different people, of different genders and different races, and different walks of life, but it's not the point of the movie. It is not shoved in your face. Diversity is included in this film as a natural and organic thing, and that is how it should be. And they did it beautifully. And I think that anyone watching this film is going to find someone to relate to and really identify with, both in terms of personality, in terms of maybe your ethnic background, in terms of who you are as a person, in terms of your morals or your values. I think one thing that makes this story really great is how organically it weaves in so many different kinds of people, and you can really end up relating to that, and they do it so well. The acting is also superb in this film. I have almost no quibbles at all with any of the talented actors and actresses that appeared in this movie. Zachary Levi did a great job at portraying and mirroring the behaviors of the 14-year-old boy that he is before he transforms. And he has just the right amount of whimsy and comical timing in this role to pull it off and sell you on the fact that you think you are looking at a teenage boy in an adult man's body, and you're not looking at an adult man pretending to be a teenage boy, which is technically what Zachary Levi was doing, but he did it so well that you really buy into the fact that is still Billy. You don't think of it as Billy as an adult, that's Billy. And it made his performance hit the mark perfectly. And as the younger Billy, Asher Angel, he did a great job as well. His performance was incredibly emotive and evoked a lot of feeling and really helped you identify with the character and gave you a strong glimpse into what happens to a kid that's ended up on the path of growing up in a foster situation and trying to seek approval, seek a family, and try and learn who he is. Jack Dylan Grazer was superb as Freddy. I would even argue that he probably had one of the more difficult acting jobs in this film. Freddy is the best friend. He becomes the best friend of Billy. He is a foster brother in the foster family that Billy ends up joining. And Freddy is sort of Billy's sidekick throughout the film. And now I would argue that Jack Dylan Grazer had a very difficult position in terms of acting for this movie, because he not only had to behave the same way and in a certain manner of treatment and a level of treatment toward Billy as the younger actor portraying younger Billy, but also towards Zachary Levi as the older adult Shazam, and he had to maintain that same degree of acting and camaraderie with both of those two actors separately, and he did a great job. He really sold me on the on-screen banter and the relationships developed between them as friends and as brothers for both the older Shazam and younger Billy. He did a great job. I was super impressed with his performance. And it wasn't just them either. The entire supporting cast was delightful. I loved Jaimin Hansu's wizard Shazam. I thought he was so fun in that role. I loved the Vasquez couple and all of the kids that made up their foster family. Darla was freaking adorable. Eugene was hilarious. Pedro Pena was great. He had some very quietly comic moments. And Mark Strong was strong as our supervillain in this. I would argue that the strength of his acting actually brought more depth to the supervillain character of Dr. Sivana than was actually written in there. And that is what a very talented actor will do. They will take what is written and then enhance it and give it so much more nuance and depth that it really, really brings that character to life for us. And Mark Strong did exactly that. The music was on point for this. I loved every choice they made in the soundtrack. The movie was engaging the whole time. I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to grab my phone, other than to immediately text my brothers, who always ask me before my reviews go up if I've seen certain movies, because they like to hear what I think about them. And I wanted to immediately, like while I was in the middle of a movie, text my brothers and be like, this movie is amazing. You should definitely go see it. The one thing I really had issues with, well, I should say there's two things, and they both involve the role of the Sins in this movie. The Sins help give Dr. Sivana his superpowers, right? My issue with that is that we get a wonderfully great backstory for Dr. Sivana, but we don't get much of an explanation for the Sins or what they've done in the past or why they're so scary. We do have some scenes where they're in action, but overall, I don't know if it was the design of them or just the CG or the fact that there wasn't a lot of history to it other than a brief overview by the first wizard Shazam in this, but they were a little campy. They weren't as well developed as I would have hoped, which was a shame. And the other issue that I had, which is directly tied into that, is that I think that the production's budget mostly went to the CG for the superhero powers and effects. Those were so beautifully seamless. It was very impressive to see. But I feel like that also led to a neglect for how the Sins were done, because they actually looked to me, and maybe this was a deliberate choice and I just am not aware of it. The Sins looked to me like the demon dogs in Ghostbusters. The same kind of CG style, almost like puppets, and a lot of scenes against the backgrounds or against the characters they were interacting with. There was a very clear, like white line almost, that marked the separation between the Sin character and either the background or the character that they were supposed to be kind of meshing with, or, you know, merged into that environment. It was they were obviously out of place in a lot of scenes. And there was that old movie style quality. Like if you think of the scene in Ghostbusters where the demon dogs kind of run, they have that kind of jerky, choppy, CG-ish movement. The Sins have that quite a lot in this movie. So it makes me, I don't know if it was done on purpose. It did make me think maybe they just didn't have the budget left over to really polish that up. And I would say those are the really two biggest issues I have with this film. Not enough of a background for me to convince me that the Sins are truly scary and like the real villains here, and their CG just wasn't up to the same level as the rest of the film. My final rating for Shazam is 95%. That is one of the highest ratings I have given. I absolutely did not want this film to end from the beginning to the end with the wonderful story and character development of every character, not just the main characters, to the really coolly animated credits at the end. It was fantastic. I was so jazzed watching this film. I highly recommend that you go see it. And if you do go see it, make sure you stick around for the mid-credits scene and the post-credits scene, because they are both fun and also help set up for additional films that are coming in the DC universe, which is not anymore, I think, the dark DC extended universe that we have been deluged in up until this point. That's what I think of Shazam. I was so impressed with this movie. You should definitely tell me what you guys think. Make sure you tell me who your favorite hero in this movie is down below in the comments. And if you're going to talk about spoilers, make sure you preface it with spoilers so that we don't inadvertently ruin it for someone else. I hope you're all doing wonderfully and enjoying the very beginning of spring, and I will catch you later.